Amy Morgan, the feature writer with the Marriage Initiative, and I'm just so delighted today to introduce you to Shelby Abbott. Shelby's the newest voice at Family Life, hosting the podcast Real Life Loading, which targets the 18 to 24-year-old audience. Shelby's also a speaker, campus minister, and author. 2 of his 5 conversational books, I'm a Tool to Help with Your Dating Life, and What's the Point? Asking the right questions about living together in marriage help Christian men and women tackle cultural issues of today with his trademark humorous style. Shelby's married and has 2 daughters. Shelby, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Well, you are a brave man tackling that Gen Z audience when I think we're both just slightly past that ourselves.
Smidge.
Why this age group? How do you resonate with them?
I came on staff with Cru, mission organization, right when I graduated from college because I believed the founder of Cru, Dr. Bill Bright, said that if you change the college campus today, you change the world tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And so I worked with college students for 20 years, and I still believe that regardless of whether or not a young person is going to college, they will change the world tomorrow. They are the future. And so I love that right after high school kind of period, when if someone shows up to an event that you're doing or a Bible study or church even, they're there because they want to be there. They're not there because anyone's making them be there like their parents. So that's a very formative time. And if you can apply the gospel to a young person's life in that formative time, there's a very good chance that they're going to walk with Jesus for a lifetime and change the future for the glory of God.
Well, that's kind of what happened with you, right? You found Christ in college, and then you started this journey of working with Cru. Tell us a little bit about that. It definitely establishes your street cred.
Well, I came to college at Virginia Tech as a non-believer, but I thought I was a Christian because I was a good kid, and so I got involved with the ministry of Cru and the ministry of navigators pretty quickly as soon as I got to college. And I realized after about a semester that I was playing Christian and I'd never actually said yes to inviting Jesus into my life and asking him to forgive me of my sin and transform me into the person he wanted me to be. So I made that decision when I was 19, January of my freshman year, and my life changed in many ways. It became about grace. It wasn't about works anymore. It wasn't about trying to earn God's favor. It was learning to apply grace to every part of my life. And so when I graduated from college, I'd been involved with Cru for 4 years. And it was an easy decision for me to come on staff with Cru. So I came right on staff right afterward. And then I've been working with young people ever since. So that it was kind of my journey of seeing how God could transform my life while I was in college. And so I just have wanted to replicate that as much as possible.
How did you make the connection then with Family Life? Because you had about a decade of youth like camps and the summer evangelistic camps with your wife, and how did that connect to Family Life?
Yeah, we did. We were on staff I was on staff for 20 years with the campus ministry of Cru, and then right around after about being on staff for 21, 22 years or so, I had written a book called Pressure Points, which was about, navigating student stress. And Family Life Today had invited me to come down to, at the time, their headquarters were in Arkansas. And so they invited me to come down to Arkansas to be on the radio show to talk about my book. And while I was down there, the president of Family Life, David Robbins, was relatively new. He took over after Dennis Rainey. He said, I would love for you to take what you're best at in terms of creative communication, writing, speaking, that kind of a thing, hosting, and bring that to Family Life. And so I was right in transition at the time when I was with the campus ministry. I wasn't on a college campus anymore. I was doing creative communications. And so it was really the right time. And I was at the right place at the right time. And so I eventually transferred over to Family Life, which is Family Life is a ministry of Cru. So I pretty easily hopped right over to that. And David was like, you don't have to move. I want you to stay where you're at, living right outside of Philadelphia. And so I started working for Family Life right before the pandemic hit. So,
and you have a radio show podcast kind of a both and. Tell us about that, because that started just about 18 months ago, right? And you've been working on that, and it's going to transition a little too. But tell us kind of its journey with that.
Yeah, one of the things that they wanted me to do when I came was not only to write and host different things, but and speak, but they wanted me to think about a new endeavor at trying to reach young people, that being primarily a podcast. And that's really what I wanted to do as well. And so they wanted to also put it on the weekend for the radio program, because Family Life Today, their flagship radio show, is on Monday through Friday. They wanted a show to go on the weekend, and the radio would choose between Saturday and Sunday. And so I was like, the radio is really not my thing, but mostly because young people don't typically listen to the radio. Some do, but not many. And I said, I want to be a podcast. And so they said, you could do both. And so I ended up working on interviewing people and beginning kind of trying to find my legs on what the show would actually be, tackling, issues that are relevant to a young person in a very frank, honest way, and not pretending like we have all the answers. Because the show is called Real Life Loading ... And when you plug your phone into your car, you get that loading with those dots going, or something's loading on your computer screen, or when you get a text message, even their 3 dots show up. It communicates being in process. We haven't arrived. Life is very much in a state of loading. And so I really loved that. And we're not someone who claims to have all the answers, but we're very focused on the supremacy of Scripture, and of course of Jesus and the gospel. And we started airing in September of 2022. And so we've been on about a year and a half now. And as we approach the end of this year, we're actually transitioning off the radio, which I'm actually excited about, because it gives us more of an opportunity to release podcast episodes that aren't kind of shackled into a 28.5-minute time frame, which is what we have to do for the radio show. So we can go a little bit shorter if we wanted to. We can go a little bit longer, and we could tackle subjects that we don't necessarily need to pay attention to the fact that there might be young ears listening, which is great on the radio, but we could tackle stuff that would be a little bit more intentional at reaching this 18 to 28-year-old audience. So that's kind of where we're going, and I'm real excited about that.
Well, let's talk about some of those subjects, and maybe too about your style. I mean, we kind of talked about that too, that you're kind of getting away from that question answer typical radio style that those who've listened to, family radio shows for a long time, like I have, are more familiar. But podcasts are kind of a different animal. There's some, really popular ones that I know. I have 2 sons in the upper end of your target audience, and that's what they listen to. So let's talk about that. Your guests, your formatting, how you're working things out in the new way.
Yeah, younger people, we found in our research, not only learn from people who teach or experts at different stuff, but they learn from their peers. They want to listen and tune in. If they see someone with a young face, they'll want to tune in if they feel like the subject is relevant to them. And so we're moving away from, we release a new episode every Friday. So it comes out every single week. And we are moving away from interviewing like an expert every single week, which is what we've been doing for a long time, to moving toward maybe having an expert on once a month, or maybe 2 times a month. Probably we're lean more towards once a month. And so we're going to talk less about young people and talk with young people. And so I'm going to have an engaging conversations with young people who don't have all the answers. Their life is very much in process. They're asking hard questions. They're leaning into what it looks like to walk with Jesus as a young person. And I'm going to kind of talk with them, shepherd them through that conversation, and ask them frank things, encourage them to be honest. And then, one of the themes of the show, the tagline actually of the show, is somewhat anxious, always authentic. So we're always going for some element of reality, not like faking it and try to pretend like we have the answers, or that the story ends with a nice bow on the end. It is a story that's being worked out in real time. And there's some anxiety that comes with that, especially with young people. And so we're talking about the issues that are relevant to them. Things like anxiety, as I mentioned, fear, loneliness, pain, suffering, addiction, sexuality, what it looks like to be in a healthy way, like organized, and how to communicate well. We're dealing with like real world stuff that a young person wrestles with on a daily basis, but applying the truths of the gospel to help create real life transformation. It's not a self-help podcast at all in any way. It's a podcast that doesn't shy away from the fact that Jesus is the solution, but we're also going to be very full of grace as we recognize that people struggle with things like eating disorders. They struggle with things like past abusive relationships. They struggle with breakups. They struggle with dating. They struggle with, should I move in with this person? They struggle with tons of different things, but we're going to apply the gospel right where they're at.
Well, you talked about that, about, some of these, the culture, especially the culture that our 18 to 28-year-olds are, it's so different, first of all, than what the Bible said, but so different than some of us might have been raised with. And yet you're still trying to get them back to the gospel answer. Can you give us maybe one example for our marriage champions who may be a little bit older like me, and, kind of how they're, maybe they're thinking of their own, adult children, or maybe they're thinking of the people in their churches that they're working with, the dating, the ones who are dating, or the ones who are soon to be married or premarital, and they're asking these questions. What can you tell us? Just give us an example of how you bring that back around.
Yeah, I think the temptation is always to deal with the symptoms of problems as opposed to the true authentic solution. And so if you have a tree that is bearing rotten fruit, the easy thing to do is to pick the rotten fruit and throw it away. But when the season comes back around again, it's still going to produce rotten fruit. And so you need to get to the roots of what's going on in the tree so that it stops producing rotten fruit. You need to get to the soil and what's going on deep down in the life of a person. So, for example, if someone is wrestling with the idea that, like, they're doing well in a number of different areas with spiritual disciplines, but they have no idea what it looks like to have a healthy dating relationship, they're just completely inept, like with communication or how they treat the other person, or they're like, yeah, maybe we should move in together, or yeah, of course we're having sex, any of those kinds of things. They're just moving into that. The temptation for an older person is to look at that person and say, stop it. You shouldn't do this. This is dishonoring to God. The Bible says this here, so stop it. But yes, it's important to help young people know the difference between right and wrong, and especially like what the scriptures communicate about what's right and wrong. But if you're only dealing on that surface level, you're cutting off the rotten fruit, or you're attempting to cut off the rotten fruit. You're not going down deeper into the heart levels of what's going on with the young person, who really is making decisions up here based upon things that they believe down here. And so you really want to address the heart issues. Why would a young person think, yeah, the natural next phase in our relationship is going to be, moving into physical union with one another. Like, we're going to be having sex, or we're going to move in together. That's just, that's what we're supposed to do. But they believe something before they make that decision. And so going after the belief system is really what's more important, because that's honestly going to only be the life change that would really last for a long time. You can do behavior modification all day long. And there's a reason a new self-help book comes out every 4 months. It's because they don't work. They work for a second, but they don't actually give lasting change. And so we're applying the gospel. You can look at the young person in your life, apply the gospel to the root issues in their heart, in their life, and less with the symptoms. Of course, we want to deal with the symptoms. Just like, if you have a runny nose, you want to take some cold medicine, but the cold medicine is not going to address the virus that's going on. So we want to attack the virus with the truth of the gospel while we're also dealing with the symptoms. Telling people to stop it, though, it's just not going to be helpful. And honestly, the young person in your life is probably going to be like, I'm good. I don't need your advice anymore. And we don't want that at all, right?
Right. To keep the dialogue open and be able to, I know we had talked a little bit about family life, about one of the goals is to help the family kind of land the marriage and family plane. And you talked about your audience was farther upstream than that.
Yeah. So, in terms of like marriages and families, family life typically is a ministry that lands the plane there, that deals with like relationship issues and parenting issues and communication, all that kind of stuff within the context of being a married couple. It's great. But before you need to land a plane, you need to build a runway. And before you need to build a runway, you need to clear the brush so that a runway can be built so a plane can land. So I kind of consider the ministry that I'm doing is clearing the brush. You don't prepare to be a good spouse when you put a ring on your finger. You prepare many years in advance. You don't prepare to be a good parent when the baby is born. You actually prepare way in advance. And so what I'm trying to help young people understand is that regardless of what their future looks like, if they're married, that's great. If they're not, if they're single, that's great too. But regardless of what their future holds, they need to put certain spiritual disciplines and practice into place now so that they're ready when the time comes. If you're going to run a marathon, you don't show up to the starting line day of completely unprepared. You have to work at it. You have to get ready so that you're in shape. So when the gun goes off and you start running, you're prepared for that race. And that's basically what I'm doing. I'm trying to help young people get in shape for the inevitability of whatever marathon will come in their life, because life is going to be difficult. It is going to be full of struggles and suffering and hard times. It's also going to be full of joy and delight and fun. And so we can talk about these things in a frank way, that it's not just preparing for the future, and that's like the reality, but also what does the preparing look like now to do that well in the future, but also to live your life in a way right now, because God cares about the right now as much as he does the future. So I'm trying to do both of those things at the same time. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, very much so. And one of the ways you talked about was people having no idea how to do relationships. And that was one thing that you said you found leading one of the summer discipleship experiences. And so that inspired you to write your tongue-in-cheek I Am a Tool book. Let's talk about that, because that one, actually, you have an excerpt of that on your website, right? That talks about dating in the digital age. But let's start back to, you wrote it in 2014, but it's still so very relevant.
Yeah, I had a guy who was on a summer mission with me, and he was just amazing at a ton of different things. He knew how to share the gospel really well. He knew the scriptures. He was studying the Bible. He was involved in the active discipline of prayer. He was relationally great with other people, but he started dating a girl when he was on the summer mission, and he was completely inept. He had no idea what to do. Like he had no idea how to, like, in a healthy way, communicate with this girl. He would say one thing but do another, and he had taken his cues from culture for so long that he just didn't know how to interact with this girl. And I thought to myself, if this guy, who's like doing well in a lot of different areas, needs help when it comes to the dating world, how many other young people need help as well? So that's why I decided to write the book. And of course, it's going to talk about like sex and why we should avoid those, things that can trip us up in relationships. But it's also about communication. It's also about serving the other person. It's also about building a good friendship with that person. I write a chapter on singleness in there. I wrote a chapter about how to break up well. Like, I tried to be intentional about those things. And then the major shift that's happened in the relationship world is what you alluded to. It's the digital aspect of what it looks like to be in relationship now. It's not as much, I see this person, I enjoy spending time with this person, we're going to, go out on a date, get to know one another, and then we'll end up, follow the line of thinking, and then we'll get married. Yeah, that can happen, and it still does happen, but a lot of people now are finding people through apps and through different digital means where they run into people, even on social media apps and that kind of thing. And so 2014 was just the early part of that. And so I was dealing with that then. Obviously, there's a ton that's happened in the digital world and the internet world since then, but the principles basically still apply. Like, what I try to communicate in the book is that, like, if you're communicating through a digital device, you're communicating through edited content. You're putting up the best version of yourself on Instagram Reels or whatever. And you're also, even when you send a text message to someone, you have the ability to push the backspace button and edit what you've just said.
Yep.
And so I like to help people understand that, like, if you're falling in love with someone through an app, you're falling in love with a veneer of that person, the shined up, the polished version of that person. And so if you really want to get to know someone, you have to spend time with them face to face, or like through like FaceTime, like you and I are doing, where you could see like body language and you can catch awkward moments and silence and like say something that you didn't mean and backpedal and apologize and ask for forgiveness. That's what relationships are. It's messy and it's not polished. It's not perfect, and it's not supposed to be. And it needs to happen in the context of real world face-to-face interaction. And so I try to communicate that to young people, and it's amazing how much they're like, this is something I never thought about before. And I'm like, okay, sure, it's common sense to me, but they really do want help with this because they do want to walk with Jesus and they want their relationships to glorify God. They just lack the tracks to run on. And so I really wanted to lay it for them.
Yeah. Well, like you said, you can't marry an Instagram reel. You have to, it has to be a real person. And they're, maybe you can meet, again, it's so popular now to meet people or communicate. But at some point where the rubber meets the road, you really have to spend time, because if you're going to be spending time in a house with someone for the rest of your life and making children and, washing the dog and all those things, that doesn't happen over social media. That happens in person. Yeah.
And I think it's easier for us as an older generation to look down on it and say it's stupid. But honestly, this is where they live. This is what they do. So instead of mocking it all the time, why not go to it, understand it, and then apply the gospel biblical principles to where they're already living, and then change it from the inside. That's what Jesus did. So like, he came into a culture, he spoke in a way, Paul did the same thing. He spoke in a way that was like winsome and attractive and said, hey, I'm going to come into where you are. I'm going to meet you right where you're at. That's the gospel. I'm going to meet you right where you're at, and I'm going to change it. And that's really what I want to do, instead of just kind of stepping back from it and going, well, in my day, we used to do this and that's stupid. You need to do it the way that I did it. And like, that's not going to help at all.
No. Well, the Dating in the Digital Age, it is a free download that you offer right on your website. And it had some really smart advice. I know I looked at it. Let's talk about a few of your advice, because I mean, they're actually great for everybody, but don't start or break up with someone on social media.
Yeah. Again, it's a little bit like, on social media, what does that mean? But like, a lot of times people will communicate through direct message on Instagram or through TikTok and stuff like that. And so a lot of times they start a relationship that way, and maybe they end a relationship that way, in the sense that I just talked to a student 2 days ago, and she said that like she ended up, this guy broke up with her, and then he like deleted her off of everything, like just cut her out completely, like no more Instagram, no more following it, and like blocked her number. And she was like, it went from like, he was like basically my best friend to someone who now is a complete like anomaly to me. Like, and it really hurt. Yeah, it really hurt. And so she felt, is a term called ghosting too, where it's just easier to like stop communicating. And so like breakups need, I always say that breakups, you need to have the self-respect and the respect enough for the other person to meet with them, if only for 5 minutes, and say, this is not something that's going to work out. Have the guts to do it face to face. But a lot of people don't, because they want their phone to do the dirty work for them. And I encourage them not to.
Well, and one of those things is just common sense. Actually, one of your tips, your 10 tips, is common sense for anyone, even adults. Don't constantly be on your phone when you're with other people. I know even as an adult, it's tempting for me. I may be at some sort of a social gathering and something gets a little boring, and it's easy enough to grab that phone and, oh, do I have a text? Do I have just, oh, it's my email. It could be work. It could be important.
Yeah. It's an addiction. No doubt. It's an addiction. Like, just the way that like someone is addicted to smoking cigarettes, often they feel like, well, things are hard, I'm going to light up. Things are awkward, I'm going to light up. Things are happy, I'm going to celebrate and light up. Like, that's basically what we do with our phones. Like, if we're honest, how often, when you think about it, when you're at a stoplight in your car, do you immediately go reach for my phone because I got 15 seconds here to look at something? And it's one of those disciplines that not only we're guilty of as a bit of an older generation, but the younger people are as well. And so it's really important to learn what it's like to live in the awkwardness of human relationships. So when you're with other people, if you're not really with them because you're away on your phone, if you know what I mean, like you're somewhere else, you may not intentionally be communicating this, but essentially what you're communicating is whatever's going on outside of this conversation is actually more important to me than what's happening right here.
Yeah.
And you're saying that by hopping on your phone, even though you may not intentionally be thinking that, but that's essentially what you're doing. And by the way, kids learn that really quickly too. If you're like bored around your kids and you pull out your phone, they start to go, mom and dad care more about what's going on their phones than they do with me. And I'm super guilty of that, just as much as any other parent probably raising their kids out there. And so we need to learn to recalibrate, figure out lean into the discipline of being bored. What's wrong with being bored? Well, boredom is in and of itself is not bad. It just often boredom leads to foolishness. It just leads to stupid decisions. So if we can take boredom is often the impetus for creativity. It's often the genesis of doing something unique and different and fun. And even like connection wise with other people, you have the ability to connect when you're bored because your mind is all of a sudden open, but you have to go through that door in order to get to that fruit. And most of us just settle for our phones and we never even get to it. As soon as boredom comes around, we're like, nope, I'm going to immediately drop kick it out of my life. But maybe that's not always a good idea.
Well, that's inspirational. Well, we would be remiss if we didn't talk about your book, What's the Point of Marriage? That's one of your more recent ones. And asking the right questions about living together in marriage, because like you said, that's how most of this generation look at the next step.
Move it in together. Yeah. Cohabitation. It's funny, when I was doing the research for that book, I dare to say 80% of it is secular research, like that all of it communicated it's a bad idea to move in together before you get married. And that's talking about specifically like cohabitation, people, married couples who cohabitate before they actually get married. They are more likely to get divorced. They are more likely to experience single parenthood. They're more likely to experience poverty, like low income levels. They're more likely to experience domestic abuse or violence. And the list goes on and on and on. And so like it's the research says don't do this. And, you know, the natural tendency, I think, is, and the one thing that the evil one has convinced all of us is like, you have to test drive a car before you buy it. And so often they think, yeah, well, that just makes sense. I'm going to move in with this person to learn what they're like, to see if this is the right next move. And the research says often men do that because they're lazy and they don't, not everyone, but that's the stats are men do it because they're lazy and it's the path of least resistance. And women do it because they want to keep the man. And the stories that I found in it is that men never want to commit. If they're like, why would I commit if I don't need to? And women often feel in the context of cohabiting that they're on a multi-year audition to be the guy's wife. And they just never feel like they measure up. And it's so sad. It's just really, really sad. And so living together is one of those things that people say, I don't need a piece of paper, like a marriage certificate, to show you that I love you. And what I have found, especially in doing the research and working with young people for such a long time, is that they genuinely believe that. I don't need a piece of paper to tell me or tell you that I love you. And, you know, just looking at what the truth of Scripture communicates, it's my inevitable next question is, what is your definition of love? Because biblically speaking, when it comes to love is about a covenant. It's about a commitment. It is about the piece of paper. In fact, it's all about the piece of paper. Any married couple can look back on their life and go, yeah, there's been plenty of times I don't feel like being married to this person anymore. But your feelings go up and down, up and down, up and down all the time. It doesn't mean like divorce, get back together, divorce, get back together, to divorce, get back together. No, because you're committed to one another. You know, you're not going anywhere. So in a sense, love is a commitment. So if I were to tell my wife, I love you because you're pretty, she might go, well, what happens when I'm not pretty anymore? I love you because you are incredibly gifted at this and this and this. She goes, what if I'm an accident and I'm not able to do those things anymore? If you ever say, I love you because, and anything that's behind that because, that's the actual reason that they know that they are loved. If it's any reason other than because I love you, then you're going to have problems in your marriage. It's taken me a long time to learn that. But God says that to us in his covenant love relationship with his people. He says, I love you, not because you're great. The Israelites weren't great. He just said, I love you because I love you. I love you because I love you because I love you. And that's essentially what the Bible defines as true love, which is what marriage is supposed to be. It's not a commitment to my feelings about how I look at you. It's a commitment to the commitment. And that commitment says, I'm not going anywhere, regardless of how you look, how you act, you know, what you smell like what you're going to do in the future, how much money you're going to earn, like all that kind of stuff. Now, there are exceptions, of course, and there's biblical reasons for like getting divorced. There are. But like in terms of cohabitation, it's not like the next logical step. It's actually insanity. And so what people need to realize is that commitment, it's a big scary word, is something that often leads to the best kinds of relationships. Committing to a person, love often follows that in deeper ways than they'd ever known.
Wow, that is definitely inspiring. And I think will be really helpful to our marriage champions, especially those that maybe are working with that, college, young adult, pre-married age, when they're asking them those questions and they're thinking through that. So that'll be very helpful. Shelby, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun to talk with you.
Oh, well, as always, marriage champions, you can find out more about Shelby and his resources at marriageinitiative.org.